Well, welcome to the Church Office podcast.
My name's Gavin Smith, and if you're joining us on video, then here's a little wave.
We're excited to have Nigel Ring join us.
I've never actually heard the word wicked and accountant put in the same sentence.
Do you have any top tips on recruiting volunteers? This is a really challenging part of my job at the minute, and you can kind of feel that. And I guess chatting to a few church administrators, that is the case for lots of people at the minute. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Hi, Rachel, and others who have the same sort of question. I think that volunteers is a huge issue. Yeah. And I'd like to just back up a little bit before answering the specific question to talk about volunteers and what we mean by volunteers. Yeah. When people become Christians and join the church, they're not joining a social community that's for its own good, but they're joining an army that is for out there. Yeah. And when you get a recruit in the army, those who are over that recruit do their very best to bring the best out of that recruit. But they also tell that recruit what to do. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain kind of relationship there with members of the church, which is a bit similar. Yeah. If we use the word volunteer, which to be honest I don't like very much, it does appear once or twice in the Bible, but not very often. Yeah. Yeah. And I see it much more in terms of a fresh recruit, someone who's come into the church to stand shoulder to shoulder with others, to be part of the army to move forward. Yes. And that we have a responsibility, those who are in leadership of a church, or someone like Rachel, who clearly has a responsibility for building teams, perhaps. Yeah. Yeah. We have a responsibility for putting people in the right place so that their gifting is allowed to be expressed. Yeah. David, in 1 Chronicles, when he was kind of out in the wilderness, as it were, men came to him and says, "We are yours, David." He didn't have to say, "Can I have some people to come and help me?" No, they would, on the right front foot, saying, "No, we want to move forward in this mission, whatever it is, scary as it is." And so I would back up a little bit from Rachel's immediate question, almost talking to those who are leading and shaping the church. Is there an atmosphere, an atmosphere in the church of serving and of the privilege of serving? Yes. And of the desire for my gifting, whatever that is, to be built and allowed to flourish. I would then say, starting to address Rachel's question, that recruiting volunteers or finding volunteers is not ideally about standing up on a Sunday saying, "We need some people to help with the children's work. Anyone out there?" Because the people who respond to such a request are those who are already overstretched, who have a tender conscience.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas what you really want is to say, "Sue, David, I see a real gifting in you, maybe only embryonic, but you love children. I can just see it in the way that you watch families and so on.
Yeah, it's good.
Have you ever thought of serving in the children's work? Maybe just give it a trial for a month or two, see how you get on, so that you're giving people the dignity of knowing they've been recognized, someone's noticed them, that they're not just there as do-it people to solve your problem because you've got a job to be done, but they're there because you want the best from them." I remember with feeding the 5,000, Jesus, he would delegate to the disciples who were with him, not to get the job done, although it did, but actually he delegated strategically to build their faith. And so it's important when we're building teams and looking for, quotes, volunteers, that we put the right people in those teams because they want to be there. And because they see it as an opportunity for their own gifting to be developed. I love the passage or several passages in Exodus 35 and 36, when they're building the tabernacle out in And it says, everyone whose heart stirred him and everyone whose spirit moved him came to serve. And it goes on. There are several situations in verse 36. All the skillful men among those who were performing the work made the tabernacle. There were people who said, I want in on the act. This is what I can bring to the table. I'm a skillful weaver of goat's hair. We don't get many of those in the church these days, but there are equivalents. And so you are mobilizing people who, when they're flowing in that area, they're highly motivated. I sometimes talk to people in this sort of a context about what makes your eyes light up when I talk to you. What do you feel passionate about? Let's harness that passion and feed that into serving in the church. So you're fulfilled and people are benefiting from your passion and gifting.
Absolutely right.
So I'd say recruiting volunteers is not about saying, I've got a need, who can help me solve it? It's about, I know I've got a need, but let's look for people who are already demonstrating a heart for that area of ministry and see if we can draw people in. And then let's be very practical and say, you know, if you come and serve with the children's work, that's not a life sentence for the next 25 years.
It's not a 10-year contract.
Absolutely, you know. We will be very clear about, if you like, the job description, and why not have a job description. We tend to think of job descriptions more for people who are employed.
We do.
But if we're wanting people to serve, let's give them a job description. These are the things we'd love. Now, I'd love you to add into that job description from your experience and your creativity. I'm asking you because you're more gifted than me. So you feed in the things you can bring to this to enrich it and fill in the colour. Let's try it for 3 months. We'll do a review at Christmas. We'll, at the end of a year, I want you to feel very free if you're serving there to say, I've enjoyed the last year, but I'm going to put it down now. You know, so it's not a life sentence. So people know that they're not getting caught up into something that they then can't get out of or get embarrassed if they do. So that touches on some of those things. I hope that will help you, Rachel, just to think through.
I think it's great. I think it's a really, really good point. And I think if you feel like you're recruiting on your own, I think you made a good point about linking into kind of the leadership of the church, is that if you're just recruiting people for roles and there's not that opportunity to go, here's how I can best see that gifting deployed, then have that conversation with your senior pastor or with somebody, because you shouldn't be doing this in isolation, that kind of sense of team working together, because I can fill a rota, but actually I need some of this motivation. I need some of this connecting to vision that you're talking about. And
tie it in with discipleship.
And
it's not just a task to get done, it's discipleship. Great vehicle for discipleship is serving. You know, it refines people. It talks about their character. It helps them to become punctual and turn up and be reliable and not suddenly just not arrive. I remember in a church I was in some years ago now, it was in Brighton, but I mean, some years ago this happened. We were quite short of people to just do the stewarding on a Sunday. So I said to the administrator, I wasn't the administrator of the church, I was an elder, I think probably at that stage, I said, I would like to lead one of the stewarding teams. And I then approached certain people who I knew were good at hospitality, because that's the sort of person you want. I said, will you serve with me on a rota? We'll do 2 Sundays in the month, whatever it is. I will tell you what to do, and then we'll review it, and I want you to be punctual. And everyone turned up, served faithfully. I thanked them, and that's an important part of it as well.
Indeed.
You know, that they are honoured, and maybe we can come on to that in a moment, but I deliberately tried to build a model of something that others could copy, where I invited people to serve with me, and then I led them and helped them, even within that very simple task of stewarding, but to be reliable, to be faithful, to do it well, to have a smile on your face, to welcome people, to show them to a seat if they couldn't find one, you know, spot who the visitor was, tell them where the children's work took place, introduce them to another family with equivalent age children, all that sort of thing.
All that stuff matters, doesn't it? It's good. One other thing I just add in here, and Rachel, this might be helpful as well, is that, you know, since we've kind of come back out of COVID and churches are kind of jumping straight back into what they were doing before, there needs to be some sort of analysis sometimes where it says, actually, do we have the capacity to keep this ministry going? Do we actually need to draw back on things? And we had an example of this in our church where we were running a mothers and toddlers group, and the person who had been running it for a number of years decided to step away, and we couldn't find somebody to replace it. So we ended up having to say, right, let's close it down for a few months, thinking feels like a very negative thing, but actually what came from it afterward was actually two ladies that got together and said, we really want to do this. We really feel like God's called us to get into this ministry. Yeah. And so the void actually created an opportunity for someone to jump in and go in faith. And God, that sense of God was calling me to do this, that sense of excitement to do it. And we were able to deploy them straight away into it. And it's flourishing. And you think it feels negative to actually sometimes stop a ministry, but actually some of those things are important steps that go,
Gavin, that's
opportunity.
So courageous and so helpful.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. If we see the church as being a God-gathered community of individuals, each with their own giftings and passion, church leadership should be looking for ways for those individuals to be outworking that gifting and passion. Yeah. Not recruiting people with gritted teeth to fulfill some ministry that they think they ought to be doing. I remember back in Brighton, I'm going back now a very long time, but a couple coming to us one day and saying, we would love to get involved with a soup kitchen of some sort on the street in Brighton. And there's plenty of opportunity for it there. And we said, well, your track record from a previous church, and they came well to us. We know that you're good at this sort of thing. Let's do it. Yeah. As soon as we publicised that, another 40 people came forward and said, we've just been waiting for the leadership. Yeah. And these 40 would prepare soup or would pray or would go out onto the level and find people or whatever it was. Yeah. And so once you've got the leadership and the passion, you feel, well, God's blessings on it. But it's important as well, and that couple did move on in due course, to know when you close it down. Yeah. I remember, I don't know if John Wimber means anything to you, but I remember him telling me from this vineyard, behind the vineyard churches. Yeah. He said that one day a biker came to him with tattoos all up his arm. Yeah. He was a born evangelist. Yeah. And he said, could I start a ministry with bikers? Yeah. And so the church did, and this guy led. Then the guy moved on. Okay. And John said to the others, right, we're closing that ministry. And they said, you can't, it's one of the most successful things we do. Yeah. He says, yes, it's successful with this guy leading it. Yeah. But then he's now moved. Yeah. We're not going to perpetuate it. It becomes a dead work rather than with life in it. Yeah. So well done.
And I think that's a really good point, Rachel, here is that kind of looking for that leadership gift and that passion and that gifting, you're right, and the character. I love the idea of you saying about mixing it in with discipleship and thinking about it in that way. Hopefully that'll give you some ideas to it. I know there's not really a formula or top tips. It's not just about being jolly on a notice, is there, and having the best strategy for people to sign up, but actually there's more going on here in terms of heart, in terms of working with a leadership team, thinking about your church, and actually getting to know people and their gifting takes time, doesn't it? You can't just find that out straight away, isn't it? I love talking to people about their jobs because it gives you one window into what they love or they're passionate about and what other things are there. So it does take time to invest into, and I think that's probably the bit that's the hardest bit, is not having the time to invest into that. But
in the long run, actually, you'll redeem time because you get the right people in the right place and it'll just flow. And
it flows, yeah. And that's a really good point to make. Yeah, so make the investment if you can. And again, if you're interacting with your leadership team on it or your vicar or whoever that might be, these conversations are great to have, and they'll be able to hopefully be able to support you to find the right time, the right priorities, and which ministries might need to stop, what ministries need to greater capacity because they're flourishing. I always feel like in a church we need that space to be able to kind of respond to an opportunity. So with the Ukrainians, we've done a Ukrainian cafe, and thinking we almost want there to be some capacity within the church to do new things and opportunities that come up that you think, right, we've had 40 people come into this Ukrainian cafe, and we didn't expect it, but being able to serve, people in that kind of need, and the volunteers that came forward for that just jumped in because they connected with it and they could see the difference it could make. So Rachel, maybe a long-winded answer, but hopefully we've got you thinking and others thinking.
I think the other thing, Gavin, for leadership is to create an atmosphere where people feel they can come forward and their ideas won't be rubbished.
Yes.
Sometimes you find churches where they think if it doesn't start with the eldership, it won't happen.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But let's encourage people to come forward to say, can I start a soup run? Can I start at this? Can I start at that?
Yes.
No, you don't just say yes. Obviously, it needs weighing.
Yeah.
But as far as possible, to release people where they have that passion actually is maybe why God's put them in the church, so that the church can have that opportunity to reach into the community through their gifting.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. If you're a pastor listening to this, then please take that advice, because you really set that atmosphere and that culture, don't you? You really, if people can come to you with their ideas freely, and there is a process to work through whether it will happen or not and what resources are allocated, but to have people who are stirred, like you were just saying in Exodus there, who were stirred to serve, stirred in their gifting, to say, I think I could play a part here. I want to be involved in this. Can you help me do that? Is that going to work? Encouraging.